Interesting, and good point. That Log4j, that whole situation we experienced over Christmas. What was your thoughts around how the government handled that particular issue, and perhaps what could they have done better, and how did it how do you think it was addressed effectively or not?
Well, I mean, look, a lot of heroic people put in a ton of effort over Christmas to try to make sure that it wasn't a disaster, because the vulnerability itself was really severe. It was very widespread because almost every enterprise application uses Log4j, and a lot of them were using vulnerable versions. And because they almost all of them log some kind of untrusted data, they're all vulnerable to this attack. And it's devastating. It's a one HTTP request attack, often unauthenticated, that will completely take over an application server. So, your whole government portal goes, into the possession of the attacker, or your whole online bank, or your whole insurance company. It's all, gets taken over. So it's really a devastating flaw. And
sure.
in terms of the response, I think, it was a lot of heroic effort, but it wasn't really necessary. These kind of things are obvious and predictable. They're going to happen every once in a while, and you need to be prepared. So, some of the obvious things that you should have in place in your organizations, you should know where all your open source is, what versions you're using, which servers they're running on, and you should be able to quickly respond. If there's a new vulnerability that comes out, you should say, well, I know that's on server ABC and these 100 other servers, and those are the ones that you need to go fix right away. But beyond that, you should also be looking on the attack side of things, and you should be able to detect attacks against new vulnerabilities right away. And you should have a mechanism for either preventing them from being exploited, or for responding with a new defense that will prevent them from being exploited very quickly. I mean, we're talking, you have to be able to put that in place in, let's say, hours after a disclosure like that.
Absolutely.
It can't be days or weeks or months. I mean, Equifax took months to respond to the Struts flaw, and they got hacked really badly. Right. But we see, whenever one of these new things comes out, Contrast monitors tens of thousands of applications for these kinds of things, and as soon as it gets disclosed, within a day, we see widespread attacks across our customer base against that new vulnerability that nobody knew about yesterday. And so, you have to be able to respond in that time. So I'm thinking hours is like the right amount of time that you have, is, a relatively small number of hours to fix it.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it makes perfect sense. I think in our industry, and certainly from government in the UK, the government securities services, they look at that golden first hour as being critical to damage mitigation and making sure that you're able to respond effectively to a threat at any given time. So yeah, totally agree with what you said. Makes perfect sense.
I was really proud of how Contrast responded to that particular flaw that came out. It's interesting, and I'll just say this because I think it's important to understand the kind of layers of defense that you need to have in place. So in the first place, in order for you to be susceptible to this Log4j thing, you have to use untrusted data in a log call somewhere. So a developer has to do something to make that happen. And that we'd call that log injection. And that's a flaw that Contrast has been pointing out for years, well in advance of Log4Shell and all that. If you had fixed all of those vulnerabilities, then you wouldn't have been vulnerable to Log4Shell, because you already prevented any untrusted data from going into log files. So there's that piece of it, is you need to have a code hygiene process in place to make sure that you're not introducing vulnerabilities. The next thing is, have an open source security program in place so that you can update libraries quickly. Your libraries are generally close to the latest version. You're able to respond quickly. And we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is this runtime protection piece. And again, Contrast has that capability. It's called RASP, technically, a runtime application self-protection. And I think we were the only vendor that prevented exploits against this Log4Shell vulnerability from even well before this disclosure was made, because we prevent kind of fundamentally the techniques that attackers were using to exploit it, things like expression language injection and unsafe deserialization. Those things, when you have RASP in place, those things can't be exploited. And so unfortunately, our customers were all protected, and we had some great feedback from our customers. Like, the teams that were using Contrast got to go home for the weekend, which was really
excellent.
nice.